Eat it. Slowly. You should remember what humiliation tastes like. Those words would echo through the Mullinax estate long after the bloodshed ended. Sharon Mullinax sat frozen at the dining table, her silver hair pinned with the same care she'd once used to raise an empire's heir, her hands trembling as she reached for the fork. Across from her stood Brenda McAdams, elegant in designer black, cruel in execution, smiling as she deliberately tilted the sauce boat over Sharon's plate, watching it spill, watching it spread, watching the old woman flinch. At the head of the room, Roman Mullinax watched. He said nothing. He did nothing. Brenda's manicured fingers pushed the ruined plate closer, sauce dripping onto Sharon's lap. The elderly woman's breath caught, but she didn't look up. Couldn't. 20 feet away from the mother who'd hidden him from assassins, who'd taken bullets meant for his childhood body, Roman Mullinax chose silence. The crystal chandelier sparkled overhead. Guards lined the mahogany walls, their faces carefully blank. Business associates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, eyes fixed on their wine glasses. Power hung thick in the air like smoke. Everyone understood the unspoken rule. Brenda was untouchable. Soon to be queen of the underworld. Soon to wear the Mullinax name. And Sharon. She was already being erased. From the service entrance, partially hidden by velvet curtains, Georgina Smith stood with a silver tray trembling in her grip. She earned $11 an hour to be invisible in this house. To clean blood from marble. To forget what she saw. To survive by staying silent. But her own mother had died alone, discarded, humiliated. And she was watching it happen again. Have you ever seen loyalty this dangerous? If this story makes your heart race, show us some love with a like and share it with someone who believes in second chances and unexpected heroes. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us hope can come from the darkest places. Inside the private study, 30 minutes after Brenda stormed out of the dining hall, Roman straightened his cufflinks and poured himself whiskey. He had done this dance many times before. Prioritize the business, protect the empire, sacrifice the personal for the political. The organization always came first. Sentiment was weakness. His father had taught him that. Brenda was already spinning the story to the other families. He knew. Controlling the narrative. Making herself the reasonable one, the modern voice, the woman strong enough to handle the Mullinax legacy. The Mafia respected strength, and Sharon's frailty made her a liability in their eyes, or so Brenda claimed. She's making you look weak, Roman, Brenda had whispered weeks ago, her lips against his ear in bed. They see you protecting a fragile old woman and they wonder if you've gone soft. If you're still the man who built this empire. Roman swirled the amber liquid in his glass, staring at his reflection in the study window. Outside, the manicured grounds stretched into darkness. Inside, he could still see his mother's face at that table, sauce staining her sleeve, her dignity stripped away course by course. He told himself it was strategic, temporary, that he'd make it up to her once the merger with the McAdams family was complete, once his position was unshakable. The lies powerful men tell themselves taste smoother than the truth. Back in the dining hall, the guests had dispersed, but Sharon remained seated, staring at her ruined plate. Her hands had finally stopped shaking, not from calm, but from resignation. She'd felt this before, decades ago, when she was young and powerless, before she married into the Mullinax name. The circle had closed. Georgina approached slowly, her maid's uniform rustling softly. Mrs. Mullinax, let me. Don't, Sharon whispered, her voice papery and thin. Don't risk yourself for me, child. I'm not worth it. But Georgina had already seen what came next in Brenda's eyes. The escalation. The physical harm that was coming, perhaps tonight, perhaps tomorrow. She'd worked in this house long enough to know, when humiliation stopped being enough, violence followed. She thought of her mother's face in that county nursing home, alone and forgotten in her final days. She thought of the promise she'd made at the graveside. Never again. Never watch someone suffer in silence. The kitchen staff whispered that Brenda had been overheard planning something special for tomorrow's family dinner. Something public. Something final. Georgina's hands clenched around the empty tray. For 15 months, she'd stayed invisible in this house of blood and money. She'd learned the art of moral blindness, of selective deafness, of tactical cowardice. It had kept her alive. It had kept her employed. It had kept her complicit. Tomorrow that would change. Tomorrow a poor maid with nothing to lose would commit career suicide, and possibly actual suicide, in front of the most dangerous man in the city. Tomorrow she would step between a mafia queen and her prey. But tonight she simply knelt beside Sharon and whispered, "I see you. You matter. And whatever comes next, you won't face it alone." Sharon's eyes, clouded with age and betrayal, filled with tears she'd refused to shed at that table. 20 feet away, Roman Mullinax had chosen power over love. And one invisible woman had just chosen the opposite. Sharon Mullinax had not always been fragile. There was a time when her name alone could silence a room. When rival families spoke it with respect, when her husband Vincent was still alive and she stood beside him as the steel spine of the Mullinax empire. She had negotiated truces, hidden ledgers from federal raids, and once, when Roman was only 7, taken a knife meant for her son's throat. The scar still ran pale and thin across her left forearm. But Vincent had been dead for 12 years now. And in the underworld, relevance has an expiration date. Brenda had studied Sharon the way a chess player studies an opponent's weak pieces. She'd watched how Roman's voice softened when his mother called, how he still visited her suite every Sunday morning for coffee, how the old guards, the ones who remembered Vincent, still bowed their heads slightly when Sharon passed. Residual power. Sentimental loyalty. Dangerous variables. "She's why you hesitate," Brenda had told Roman 6 months ago, her naked body draped across his bed, her voice honey smooth. "Every time we need to make a hard decision, you think about what she'd say, what she'd think. It's making you look weak to the other families." Roman had protested, of course. But the seed was planted. Brenda watered it with carefully chosen moments. Business deals where Sharon's old-fashioned morality would have interfered, territorial expansions that required brutality Sharon would have condemned, alliances with families Sharon had once called enemies. "Your mother is a relic of a softer time," Brenda whispered during strategy meetings. "The world has changed, Roman. Either we adapt or we die. And she's an anchor around your neck." The truth was more calculated than that. Sharon was the only person in Roman's life who still saw him as Romy, the boy who used to cry during thunderstorms, who remembered when he was human before he was powerful, who loved the man instead of the monster. As long as Sharon lived, Roman Mullinax had a conscience. And Brenda McAdams needed a man without one. At 73, Sharon's days had narrowed to a predictable rhythm. Morning tea in her suite overlooking the garden. Afternoon reading in the library. Evening meals, when she was invited, with the family. Her hands shook now, early-stage Parkinson's that the doctors said would only worsen. Her memory occasionally slipped, names and dates bleeding together. She had become, in Brenda's words, a liability. But Sharon's mind was sharper than Brenda realized. She saw the pattern. The subtle exclusions from family meetings. The way Brenda's cruelty escalated each week, testing boundaries, seeing how far Roman's silence would stretch. Sharon had written letters. Hidden them. Just in case. Because she'd survived in this world long enough to know, when you become inconvenient to powerful people, accidents happen. Falls downstairs. Medication mix-ups. Sudden heart attacks that no one questions. She'd watched it happen to others. The night of the dinner, Sharon had chosen her outfit carefully. The gray silk dress Vincent had loved, the pearls he'd given her on their 30th anniversary. If this was to be her final stand, she would face it with dignity. She just hadn't expected her own son to be the executioner's silent witness. Back in the kitchen, 3 hours after the dinner ended, Georgina Smith scrubbed sauce from the china plates with mechanical precision. Her hands moved automatically while her mind replayed the scene. Sharon's trembling fingers, Brenda's calculated cruelty, Roman's devastating silence. The other staff avoided eye contact. They'd all seen it. They'd all said nothing. "Smart girl, staying quiet," muttered Carlos, the head chef, as he passed. "The ones who interfere don't stay employed. Or alive." Georgina knew he was right. She'd been working in the Mullinax estate for 3 years, ever since her mother died and left her with $14,000 in medical debt. This job paid barely above minimum wage, but it included housing, a converted maid's room in the basement, and it kept bill collectors at bay. She couldn't afford principals. But Sharon's face kept appearing in her mind, overlapping with her mother's face in those final months. The same resignation. The same understanding that they'd become burdens to be managed rather than people to be loved. Georgina had held her mother's hand as she died in that understaffed nursing home, apologizing for being too expensive to keep alive, making herself small, making herself convenient. The memory made Georgina's chest physically ache. She finished the dishes in silence, hung up her apron, and climbed the narrow servant's stairs to her basement room. The walls were thin enough that she could hear the rumble of voices from the main house above, Roman's deep baritone, Brenda's sharp laugh. Georgina sat on her narrow bed and pulled out a small wooden box from under her mattress. Inside, her mother's rosary, 3 photographs, and a tarnished pendant her mother had given her years ago with trembling hands and a strange story. "This saved your life once," her mother had whispered during one of her final lucid moments. "When you were small, a woman protected you, hid you, took a beating meant for you. She gave me this after and said, 'Keep it. Remember that some debts can never be repaid, only passed forward.'" Georgina had been too young to remember the incident clearly. Just fragments. Shouting, her mother's arms around her, a silver-haired woman's voice saying, "Stay down, stay quiet." She turned the pendant over in her palm, studying the engraved initials she'd never fully deciphered. VM. Vincent Mullinax. Her breath caught. She'd worked in this house for 3 years and never made the connection. Never realized that the woman who'd saved her life decades ago was the same woman she'd watched being destroyed tonight. The debt wasn't just moral anymore. It was personal. Upstairs, in the master suite, Brenda McAdams stood before her vanity, removing her jewelry with satisfied precision. The evening had gone exactly as planned. Sharon humiliated. Roman silent. The other family's representatives had witnessed it, a clear message about the new power structure. Roman entered, loosening his tie. His face was unreadable. "You were quiet tonight," Brenda observed, meeting his eyes in the mirror. "I was thinking about." Roman poured himself another drink, his third of the evening. "My father used to say that power without mercy is just cruelty wearing a crown." Brenda's smile tightened. "Your father died because he was too soft, because he let sentiment cloud his judgment. Do you want to end up like him? Respected but dead." "He was loved," Roman said quietly. "Love doesn't build empires. Fear does." Brenda turned to face him directly. "Your mother is a symbol of the old way. Every day she stays in this house, people see you as divided, weak, unable to make hard choices." Roman's jaw clenched. "She's my mother. She's a problem." Brenda crossed the room, her silk robe whispering against marble. "And tomorrow night's family dinner will make that clear to everyone, including you. What are you planning?" Brenda smiled, cold and beautiful. "Trust me." But Roman's hand trembled slightly as he raised the glass to his lips. And somewhere deep in the fortress he'd built around his heart, something cracked. In her suite, Sharon sat by the window, unable to sleep. The garden below was dark, illuminated only by security lights that cast long shadows across the lawn. She'd lived in this house for 40 years, raised her son here, buried her husband in the family plot beyond those trees. And now she was a guest awaiting eviction. Her hands had finally stopped shaking, not from medication, but from decision. She'd written the final letter tonight, sealed it, hidden it in a place only one person would think to look. If tomorrow went as she feared, at least the truth would survive her. Sharon pulled her late husband's photograph from the nightstand, running her fingers across his face behind the glass. "I tried, Vincent," she whispered. "I tried to raise him right, to teach him that power without humanity is just organized cruelty. But I lost him somewhere. The empire ate the boy I knew." A soft knock at her door made her startle. "Mrs. Mullinax." Georgina's voice, barely audible. Sharon opened the door to find the young maid standing in the hallway, her face pale but determined. You shouldn't be here, Sharon said gently. If Brenda finds out. I know who you are, Georgina interrupted, her voice shaking. Not just who you are now. Who you were. 23 years ago. The ambush on Riverside Drive. Sharon's breath caught. How? Georgina held out the pendant, her hands trembling. My mother gave me this before she died. She told me a woman saved us. Took a beating meant for us. I never knew. I never realized it was you. Sharon stared at the pendant. Vincent's pendant, the one she'd pressed into a terrified mother's hand all those years ago while bullets shattered car windows around them. You were just a baby, Sharon whispered. Your mother was in the wrong place at the wrong time. They would have killed you both to eliminate witnesses. I couldn't let that happen. Tears streamed down Georgina's face. You almost died protecting us. And now. Her voice broke. Now I've been watching them destroy you and I've done nothing. Sharon reached out, cupping the young woman's face with shaking hands. Child, you owe me nothing. You've survived. That's enough. That's everything. It's not, Georgina said fiercely. My mother died thinking she was a burden, making herself small so she wouldn't inconvenience anyone. I watched it kill her spirit before her body gave out. And I swore I'd never let that happen to someone else. Not if I could stop it. You can't stop this, Sharon said gently. Brenda won't rest until I'm gone, one way or another. And Roman. Her voice broke. My son has already made his choice. Then I'll make mine. The steel in Georgina's voice made Sharon step back. Tomorrow night, Georgina continued. Whatever Brenda is planning, I won't let her finish it. I don't care what it costs me. It could cost you everything, Sharon warned. Your job. Your safety. Your life. Georgina smiled sadly, finally understanding what her mother had meant in those final days. Some debts transcend survival. Some stands are worth the fall. Then I'll pay it, she said simply. Because 23 years ago, you decided I was worth saving. And tomorrow night I'm going to prove you were right. Georgina Smith had learned to disappear long before she came to work at the Mullinax estate. Poverty teaches you that survival means making yourself small. Her childhood had been a masterclass in invisibility. Standing in free lunch lines with her eyes down, wearing thrift store clothes that screamed charity case, watching her mother work 3 jobs and still come up short every month. By the time Georgina turned 16, she'd perfected the art of being present without being seen. Then her mother got sick. Cancer, the doctors said. Stage 4 by the time they caught it. The kind that comes with treatment plans no minimum wage paycheck could cover. Georgina dropped out of community college, took every shift she could find, watched her mother apologize for dying slowly, for being expensive, for taking up space in a world that had no room for the poor and the sick. When her mother finally passed, she left Georgina with $14,000 in medical debt and a lesson carved into bone. The world doesn't care about people like us. The Mullinax estate job came through a desperate Craigslist search. Live-in Maid. $11 an hour. Room and meals included. Georgina knew what kind of house this was. Everyone in the neighborhood knew. But desperation has a way of making even blood money look clean. She'd been here 3 years now. 3 years of keeping her head down, her mouth shut, her observations to herself. The rules were simple, unspoken, absolute. Don't look at what happens in the private rooms. Don't see the bloodstains before you clean them. Don't notice when someone who came in the front door leaves in a body bag through the service entrance. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't offer opinions. Don't ask questions. The other staff who'd forgotten this rule weren't around anymore to explain where they'd gone. Don't matter. Be furniture. Be wallpaper. Be a ghost who scrubs floors and changes linens and exists only as a function, never as a person. Georgina had followed these rules religiously. They'd kept her employed, housed, alive. But Sharon Mullinax had made that harder. It started small. A genuine thank you when Georgina brought morning tea. A question about her day that expected an actual answer. Sharon had noticed when Georgina was sick last winter, appearing at her basement room with soup and medicine, sitting with her for an hour like it was the most natural thing in the world. "My mother used to make this," Sharon had said, stirring the pot on Georgina's hot plate. "She was a maid too, you know, before she married my father. She taught me that service isn't servitude, that the person cleaning the floor has just as much dignity as the person walking across it." Georgina had cried that night after Sharon left. Not from sickness, from the shock of being treated like a human being. Since then, there had been other moments. Sharon remembering her birthday with a small gift, asking about the book Georgina was reading, learning her name, her actual first name, not just girl or you there. It was dangerous, this small kindness. It made invisibility harder. It made Georgina remember she was a person, not just a function. It made her care. Now, watching the dinner unfold, Georgina felt that carefully constructed invisibility cracking. Brenda's performance had grown more theatrical, more deliberately cruel. She stood now, wine glass in hand, holding court before her audience of enablers. "A toast," Brenda announced, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. "To family, to loyalty, to knowing when to step aside gracefully." She raised her glass high, and then, as if by accident, tipped it forward. Red wine cascaded across the white tablecloth, flooding toward Sharon's plate in a deliberate crimson wave. The old woman jerked back, but not fast enough. Wine splashed across her dress, the one she'd worn with such careful dignity. Laughter erupted around the table. Nervous at first, then louder when Brenda joined in. "Oh, Sharon, I'm so sorry," Brenda cooed, her voice saccharine with false concern. "These old hands of yours, they shake so badly, don't they? You knocked right into my glass." Georgina's breath stopped. Everyone at that table had seen Brenda deliberately spill the wine. Everyone knew. But they laughed anyway, rewriting reality in real time because that's what power demanded. Sharon sat frozen, wine dripping from her dress onto her lap, her face blank with the kind of shock that comes from betrayal so complete your brain can't process it. From her position by the service entrance, Georgina felt something ancient and terrible wake up inside her chest. The same feeling she did watching her mother apologize for dying. The same helpless rage at a world that crushed the vulnerable and called it natural selection. Don't look. Don't speak. Don't matter. The rules screamed in her head. But her feet were already moving forward, her hands already reaching for a clean napkin, her voice already rising in her throat with words that would destroy everything she'd built through 3 years of careful invisibility. She knew what intervention would cost. Her job. Her safety. Possibly her life. She also knew what doing nothing would cost. The last shred of her humanity. The promise she'd made at her mother's graveside. The ability to look at herself in the mirror and recognize the person staring back. Some prices are too high to pay. Some silences are louder than screams. Brenda set down her empty wine glass and stood to her full height, towering over Sharon's seated form. The old woman looked smaller somehow, diminished by humiliation, shrinking into her wine-stained dress. Brenda's shadow fell across Sharon's face like a threat. And Georgina Smith, invisible maid, ghost in human form, made her choice. She stepped into the light. Brenda's smile widened as she reached across the table, her manicured fingers wrapping around Sharon's plate. The old woman's eyes tracked the movement with the dull recognition of prey watching a predator circle closer. "Let me help you with that," Brenda said sweetly, her voice loud enough to carry. "You're making such a mess." She shoved the plate forward with calculated force. Sharon's trembling hand instinctively reached to steady it, and slipped. Pasta and sauce exploded across the table, splattering down the front of her dress, across her lap, onto the floor at her feet. The sound of ceramic scraping against would cut through the room like a scream. Gasps. Then silence. Then the kind of laughter that comes from discomfort seeking permission to become cruelty. "Oh, Sharon," Brenda said, standing fully now, her height and youth and power radiating down at the hunched figure below her. "You really can't do anything for yourself anymore, can you?" Sharon sat frozen, food dripping from her clothes, her hands still outstretched in that useless gesture of trying to catch what had already fallen. Her face had gone blank, not from confusion, but from the complete absence of options. This was beyond humiliation now. This was erasure happening in real time. Brenda leaned down, her hand rising. Whether she meant to strike or simply wipe Sharon's face in that patronizing way you'd clean a child who'd made a mess, no one would ever know. Because Georgina moved. 3 years of invisibility shattered in a single step. She crossed the room in a blur of black and white uniform, her hands gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles went white. Her body positioned itself between Brenda's raised hand and Sharon's bowed head, a human shield where none should have existed. Enough. The word detonated in the silence like a grenade. Time fractured. Guards along the wall straightened, hands moving instinctively toward concealed weapons. Guests froze mid-laugh, their faces caught between amusement and shock, unsure which emotion the room now required. Forks hung suspended over plates. Wine glasses stopped halfway to mouths. A maid had spoken. A maid had intervened. The social order of the underworld, so carefully maintained, so brutally enforced, cracked down the middle. Brenda's face transformed. The mask of elegant concern melted away, revealing something reptilian underneath. Her eyes went cold and dead, the kind of look that preceded violence in this house. "What?" she hissed, her voice dropping to something dangerous and sharp. "Did you just say to me?" Georgina's entire body trembled, but she didn't step back. Couldn't. Sharon sat behind her, small and broken and covered in shame, and if Georgina moved now, if she apologized and scurried back to the shadows, that image would haunt her forever. "I said enough," Georgina repeated, her voice steadier this time despite the terror flooding her veins. "Do you?" Brenda's laugh was ugly, disbelieving. "Do you have any idea who I am? What I could do to you?" "Yes." The simple answer seemed to enrage Brenda further. She stepped closer, invading Georgina's space, using her height and presence like a weapon. "You're a maid. You're nothing. You're less than nothing. You exist here because I allow it. And you're standing there in your cheap uniform, your poverty written all over your face, daring to tell me what to do." Around the table, heads turned toward Roman. This was his move to make. His authority being challenged. His household hierarchy being shattered by someone so far beneath notice she might as well have been a ghost. Roman stood slowly, his chair scraping against marble. Roman looked at his mother, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. Saw not the liability Brenda had painted her as, but the woman who'd taken bullets for him, who'd held the empire together when he was too young to claim it, who'd taught him the difference between power and cruelty, even if he'd forgotten the lesson. She met his eyes, and he saw she'd already accepted her fate, already forgiven him for what he was about to do, already decided that her love for him was bigger than his betrayal. That was what broke him. Not Brenda's manipulation. Not the social pressure. Not the strategic considerations. The realization that his mother would love him even as he destroyed her. And in that moment, Roman Mullinax understood with devastating clarity. His silence hadn't been neutral. It hadn't been strategic distance or necessary detachment. His silence had been violence. Every time he'd walked past her suite without stopping. Every dinner he'd allowed Brenda to poison with cruelty. Every small humiliation he'd witnessed and rationalized and permitted. He'd been killing his mother slowly, degree by degree, telling himself it was business when it was just cowardice. Son or boss. Man or monster. The equation finally balanced. Roman's hand dropped away from Brenda's. His eyes hardened, not against his mother, but toward something else entirely. Some internal transformation that everyone in the room could sense but not yet name. "Roman." Brenda's voice carried the first note of uncertainty. "Darling, what are you?" "Get your hand off my mother's chair," Roman said quietly. The room inhaled sharply. Brenda froze. "Excuse me." "You heard me." And for the first time since the dinner began, Roman Mullinax looked like a man who'd remembered he used to be someone's son. The room held its breath, waiting for Roman's next move. Brenda's hand hovered near Sharon's chair, her face twisted between confusion and rage at this unexpected resistance. Then Georgina reached into her apron pocket. Her hands trembled as she pulled out a small object, tarnished with age but unmistakable in the candlelight. a pendant on a thin silver chain. She held it up, letting it catch the light, letting everyone see the engraved initials that had survived decades. VM. Vincent Mullinax. Roman's entire body went rigid. The color drained from his face. "Where did you get that?" His voice came out hoarse, almost broken. Georgina's hand shook harder, but she didn't lower the pendant. "My mother gave it to me before she died. She said a woman saved our lives once. Protected us when she didn't have to. Took a beating meant for us." Her voice cracked. "She told me to keep it. To remember that some debts can never be repaid, only passed forward." "That's not," Brenda started, but Roman raised his hand sharply, silencing her. He moved closer to Georgina. His eyes locked on the pendant like it was a ghost made solid. "When?" he demanded. "When did this happen?" 23 years ago, Georgina whispered. "Riverside Drive. There was an ambush. My mother was we were just in the wrong place. I was only a baby. She said we would have died if not for." "Sharon." Roman's head turned slowly toward his mother, his expression somewhere between disbelief and devastation. "The Petrov ambush. That was you." Sharon's face crumpled. Tears she'd been holding back since the wine spilled finally broke free, streaming down her weathered cheeks. She nodded, unable to speak. The room erupted in murmurs. Guests leaning toward each other, whispering, recalculating everything they'd witnessed tonight through this new lens. Roman's voice shook. "I remember being in the car. I remember the bullets. The blood. But I was so young I thought it was just us. I thought." "There was a woman," Sharon finally managed, her voice raw. "She'd been waiting at the bus stop with her baby. Wrong place, wrong time. When the shooting started, she froze. Just stood there, holding her child directly in the line of fire." Sharon's hands twisted together in her lap, sauce and wine staining her fingers. I couldn't leave her there. She was somebody's mother. That baby was somebody's whole world. So I pulled them into the car, pushed them down, covered them with my own body while your father's men returned fire." "You almost died," Roman said, the memory flooding back with terrible clarity. "You were bleeding. So much blood. I thought I'd lost you." "The Petrov soldiers came closer," Sharon continued, her voice distant, lost in the past. "They wanted to make sure there were no survivors. They saw me moving, covering something. They beat me, trying to get me to move, to see who else was in the car. But I wouldn't. I couldn't. So they focused on me instead." Georgina's tears fell silently. "My mother said she watched you take a beating that should have killed you. That you never made a sound. Never moved. Just kept your body over us until your husband's reinforcements arrived." "When it was over," Sharon said softly, looking at Georgina for the first time, "your mother was so grateful, so terrified. I gave her the pendant, Vincent's pendant, and enough money to disappear. To keep her baby safe. To start somewhere new." She smiled sadly. "I never knew what happened to you. I prayed you'd made it somewhere safe." "We did," Georgina whispered. "Because of you. We had 17 more years together because of you." The silence that followed was profound, heavy with the weight of a debt 23 years old, coming due in the most unexpected way. Then Brenda laughed. The sound was jarring, inappropriate, almost manic. "This is what we're doing now? A touching reunion story? Ancient history?" She turned to the guests, her voice sharp with derision. "So Sharon saved some random woman and her baby decades ago. So what? Weak women protect weaker women. It's what they do when they can't actually build anything themselves." The room went cold. Roman's head turned slowly toward his fiancée. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. Dangerously quiet. "What did you say?" "I said it's irrelevant," Brenda snapped, her mask finally cracking completely. "This sob story doesn't change the fact that your mother is a liability. That she's weak, confused, and making you look." "My mother took a beating that left her hospitalized for 2 months," Roman interrupted, his voice rising. She had 3 broken ribs, a fractured skull, and internal bleeding. The doctor said if she'd been hit one more time, she would have died. And she endured all of that, willingly, to protect a stranger's child. He took a step toward Brenda, and she actually flinched. That's not weakness, Roman continued, his voice now carrying the full weight of his authority. That's not confusion. That's not something to dismiss or mock or destroy. That's the kind of strength that built this family. That's the kind of courage that kept us alive when everyone else wanted us dead. Roman, you're being emotional. And you, he continued, his rage finally breaking through the surface like lava through stone. You've spent months convincing me that the woman who saved my life, who saved their lives, was worthless. That her existence was embarrassing. That eliminating her was strategy. Brenda's face paled. I was protecting your interests. You were protecting your interests, Roman snarled. You wanted her gone because as long as she lived, I'd remember that power isn't just about fear and control. That leadership means protecting the vulnerable, not crushing them for convenience. He turned away from Brenda completely, his shoulders squared, his decision made. When he faced her again, there was no love left in his eyes. Only judgment. Did you know? Roman's voice cut through the room like a blade through silk. Did you know what my mother did that day? Brenda's jaw tightened. I knew she had some dramatic story about playing hero. I didn't care then, and I don't care now. You didn't care, Roman repeated slowly, as if tasting the words and finding them poisonous. My mother nearly died protecting innocent people, and you didn't care. No, I didn't. Brenda's voice rose, her composure finally shattering completely. Because it doesn't matter, Roman. None of this matters except what serves us now. Your mother's glory days are over. She's a relic. A weight around your neck. And this pathetic maid holding up some old necklace doesn't change that. She gestured dismissively at Georgina, then at Sharon. Weak women protect weak women. It's what they do when they lack the strength to actually wield power themselves. Your mother couldn't build an empire, so she settled for small acts of meaningless charity. And now you're going to throw away everything we've planned because of some sentimental. Get out. The words dropped like stones into still water. Brenda froze. What? I said get out of my house. Roman's voice was cold now, stripped of emotion, carrying the weight of absolute authority. This wasn't the conflicted son anymore. This was the Mafia boss who'd built an empire on swift, brutal decisions. You can't be serious. Brenda laughed, but there was panic creeping into her voice. Roman, think about what you're doing. The merger with my family, the territories we planned to control, the alliances, are over, Roman finished. All of it. Over. He snapped his fingers once. The sound echoed in the sudden silence. 4 guards moved, but not toward Georgina. Not toward Sharon. They surrounded Brenda, their faces professionally blank, their hands ready but not yet touching her. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Guests half rose from their seats, unsure whether to flee or stay. This was the kind of moment that could end in bloodshed, the kind of power shift that changed entire organizational hierarchies. No. Brenda's voice turned shrill. No, you don't get to do this. My family has resources, Roman. Connections. We have dirt on you on your operations on. Then use it, Roman said calmly. Go to the authorities. Tell them everything. And see how long you survive once both our families mark you as a traitor. He leaned closer, his voice dropping. You wanted to play at being a queen, Brenda. But you never understood that being a queen meant protecting the kingdom, not just wearing the crown. I protected you. Brenda screamed, her careful facade completely gone now, revealing something desperate and ugly underneath. I made you stronger. I pushed you to make hard decisions. Everything I did was for yourself, Roman interrupted quietly. Everything you did was for yourself. I see that now. Brenda's eyes darted around the room, looking for allies, for sympathy, for any crack she could exploit. You're all seeing this, right? He's choosing a senile old woman and a worthless maid over his future. Over power. Over Take her out, Roman ordered. The guards moved swiftly. Professional. Efficient. They gripped Brenda's arms, not roughly, but firmly enough that resistance was pointless. Get your hands off me, Brenda thrashed, her designer dress twisting, her carefully styled hair coming loose. You're making a mistake, Roman. A huge mistake. My family will destroy you for this. We'll burn everything you've built. You'll do nothing, Roman said, his voice carrying absolute certainty. Because by tomorrow morning, every family in the city will know you tried to manipulate me into abandoning my own mother. That you orchestrated her humiliation for personal gain. That you mocked the woman who saved civilian lives at the cost of her own blood. He paused, letting the words sink in. The underworld has rules, Brenda. Honor. Loyalty. Respect for sacrifice. You violated all of them. You're not a threat to me. You're a cautionary tale. Brenda's face contorted with rage and terror. As the guards began pulling her toward the door, she twisted back, her voice rising to a shriek. She's going to die anyway, Roman. She's old and sick and useless. I just wanted to speed up the inevitable. I was doing you a favor. The room went absolutely silent. Sharon sat motionless at the table, her hands folded in her lap, her face unreadable. She'd watched empires rise and fall. She'd survived assassination attempts and buried a husband and raised a kingpin. And now she was witnessing the woman who'd tried to erase her being erased instead. She felt no satisfaction, no triumph. Only a deep, bone-weary sadness that it had come to this. Georgina still stood frozen, the pendant clutched in her hand, her entire body tensed for violence that never came. She'd expected to die tonight. Had made peace with it. Had decided that standing between cruelty and its victim was worth the cost. But the guards weren't moving toward her. They were dragging Brenda McAdams, screaming, threatening, unraveling, toward the service exit. The same door Georgina had watched countless others disappear through over the years. You'll regret this. Brenda's voice echoed down the hallway, growing fainter. You'll all regret this. I'll destroy you. The heavy door slammed shut, cutting off her threats mid-sentence. The sudden silence felt enormous, like the room itself was exhaling. Roman stood at the head of his table, his shoulders rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at the closed door like he was watching his future burn and wasn't entirely sure if he'd made the right choice in striking the match. Then, slowly, he turned toward his mother. And for the first time in years, Roman Mullinax allowed himself to look weak in front of witnesses. He crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to his knees beside Sharon's chair. "Mama," he whispered, his voice breaking on the word. "I'm so sorry." Roman Mullinax, who'd never bowed to rival gangs or federal investigators or death threats, knelt on the marble floor beside his mother's chair and wept. Not the controlled, strategic tears men sometimes use to manipulate. Real tears. The kind that come from a place so deep you didn't know it still existed until something cracks it open. "Mama," he said again, his voice raw. "I'm so sorry." Sharon's trembling hand moved slowly, hesitantly, like she was afraid he might pull away. Then her fingers touched his hair, the way she used to when he was small and frightened, and something broke in both of them. "I let her hurt you," Roman continued, the words tumbling out now. "I watched it happen. I told myself it was strategy, that I was protecting the business, that you'd understand. But I was just..." His voice cracked. "I was just a coward. I chose convenience over you. I chose my empire over my own mother." The guests shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to leave or stay. This kind of vulnerability from a man like Roman Mullinax was dangerous to witness. The kind of moment that could be used as leverage later, as blackmail, as proof of weakness. Roman didn't care anymore. "You have nothing to apologize for," Sharon whispered, though tears streamed down her face. "You're my son. You'll always be my son." "I don't deserve that," Roman said. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "Love isn't about deserving, Romy." She used his childhood name deliberately, reclaiming it. "It's about choosing to see the good even when the bad tries to swallow everything whole. You made mistakes. You let fear and ambition cloud your judgment. But you came back. That's what matters. Roman shook his head. I almost didn't. If Georgina hadn't. He looked up at the maid who still stood frozen by the table, pendant clutched in her hand. If she hadn't been braver than me, I would have let this happen. I would have sent you away and told myself it was for the best. He stood slowly, his face still wet with tears, and turned to address the room. The business associates, the guards, the witnesses to his transformation. I built this empire on loyalty, he said, his voice steady now despite the emotion. On the idea that family protects family. That we stand together against the world. And somewhere along the way, I forgot what that actually means. He gestured at the wine-stained tablecloth, at his mother's ruined dress, at the evidence of his failure. I became the kind of man who lets cruelty happen in his own house because it's convenient. The kind of man who values power over people. Who mistakes control for strength. His jaw clenched. My father would be ashamed of what I became. I'm ashamed of what I became. One of the captains, Castellano, cleared his throat. Roman, we all make difficult choices in this life. You don't need to. Yes, I do, Roman interrupted. Because if I don't say this now, out loud, in front of witnesses, I'll convince myself later that it wasn't that bad. That I had good reasons. That's what powerful men do. We rewrite our sins until they look like strategy. He turned to Georgina, who stood absolutely still, like a deer waiting to see if the predator would pounce or pass by. You saved my mother tonight, Roman said quietly. You risked everything, your job, your safety, your life, to do what I should have done months ago. That kind of courage deserves more than gratitude. He pulled out his phone, made a call. Marcus, I need you to set up a trust fund. Full college tuition, living expenses, health insurance. He looked at Georgina. What do you want? Name it. Anything. Georgina blinked, overwhelmed. I just want to know I won't end up on the street. You won't, Roman said firmly. Ever. You'll have a place to live, income for life, and my personal guarantee of protection. No one in this city will touch you. No one will threaten you. You have my word. That's too much, Georgina whispered. I don't need. It's not about need, Sharon interjected gently. It's about a debt that can never truly be repaid. Accept it, child. Let him do this one thing right. Georgina nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. Thank you. Roman turned back to his mother. What do you want, Mama? Do you want to stay here? Leave. I'll do whatever you need to feel safe again. Sharon was quiet for a long moment, looking around the dining room that had been the site of so much pain tonight. Then she smiled sadly. I want to leave, she said simply. Not because you're forcing me. Not because Brenda won. But because I choose to. This house has too many ghosts now, Romy. Too many memories of what we've all lost. I'll find you somewhere, Roman started, but Sharon raised her hand. I already know where, she said. There's a small house near the coast. Your father and I looked at it years ago before everything. I want to go there. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I can just be Sharon again, not the matriarch or the liability or the symbol. Just me. Roman's throat tightened. You'll have security. Whatever you need. Just my dignity back, Sharon said. That's all I've ever wanted. She stood slowly, her movements stiff from age and the night's trauma. Georgina moved to help her, and Sharon leaned on the young woman's arm with gratitude. I'll leave tomorrow, Sharon said. Tonight I'll pack. And in the morning, I'll go build something small and peaceful and mine. I'll visit, Roman said, almost pleading. If you'll let me. I'll try to be better. To be the son you deserved. Sharon cupped his face with her shaking hands. You already are, my love. You stumbled. You fell. But you got back up. That's all any of us can do. She turned to leave, Georgina supporting her, the two of them walking toward the door, the woman who'd saved a life and the woman whose life had been saved, bound together by courage and conscience. At the threshold, Sharon paused and looked back at her son. "Your father once told me that true power isn't making people fear you," she said softly. "It's making them believe in you. Remember that, Romy. Build an empire on belief, not fear. On loyalty, not terror. On love, not control." Then she walked out of the dining room, out of the mansion, out of the life she'd known for 40 years. Free at last. 3 months after the dinner that changed everything, Brenda McAdams discovered what it meant to be erased. The McAdams family disowned her within 48 hours. Not out of loyalty to Roman, though his account of events had spread through the underworld like wildfire, but because she'd violated the one unspoken rule that even criminals respected. You don't humiliate someone's mother for sport. Her bank accounts were frozen by her own family. Her contacts stopped returning calls. The luxury apartment she'd maintained independently was suddenly under new management. Her belongings boxed and left on the curb like trash. She tried to leverage the secrets she'd claimed to possess, the dirt she'd threatened to expose. But Roman had been thorough. Every compromising document she'd collected had been anticipating exactly this scenario. Her blackmail material was either neutralized or turned back against her. Within a month, Brenda McAdams, who'd once stood poised to become queen of the underworld, was working retail in a strip mall 3 states away, using a fake name, looking over her shoulder every time the door chimed. The underworld had delivered its verdict. Some cruelties are unforgivable. Some lines, once crossed, erase you from the world that made you. No one mourned her disappearance. Georgina Smith enrolled in college that fall. Community college at first. She wasn't ready for university, hadn't been in a classroom in years. But she was hungry for it. Hungry for the knowledge, the structure, the proof that she could be more than invisible. She studied social work. Not because Roman had suggested it. He hadn't. But because she couldn't forget the feeling of stepping between cruelty and its victim. Couldn't forget that moment when she'd chosen humanity over survival and discovered they weren't mutually exclusive after all. The trust fund Roman had set up sat mostly untouched. She used it for tuition, for a modest apartment near campus, for books and the kind of basic security that let her sleep without fear. But she still worked part-time at a coffee shop, still earned her own money, still maintained the independence that poverty had taught her to value. She visited Sharon twice a month, driving up the coast to the small house overlooking the water. They'd become friends, real friends, not maid and employer, not savior and saved. Just 2 women who'd survived the same brutal dinner and emerged somehow intact. "You're doing well," Sharon observed one afternoon, watching Georgina navigate a difficult textbook on trauma-informed care. "Your mother would be proud." Georgina smiled. "I think about her every day. About the promise I made at her grave. I'm keeping it, I think. Refusing to look away when people suffer. Learning how to actually help instead of just witnessing." "That's more than most people ever do," Sharon said softly. Roman Mullinax changed, though not overnight and not completely. Power doesn't relinquish its grip easily. He still ran a criminal empire. Still made decisions that kept him awake at night. Still existed in a world where violence was currency and mercy was often mistaken for weakness. But he ruled differently now. The old guards noticed it first. The way he asked questions before ordering executions. The way he investigated claims instead of accepting accusations at face value. The way he protected the families of his soldiers, ensuring their children had education funds, their widows had support. "You've gone soft," one of the captains muttered during a strategy meeting. "No," Roman corrected quietly. "I've remembered why we built this in the first place. To protect our own. To create safety in a world that offers none. If we're just recreating the cruelty we fled from, what's the point?" He thought of his mother often. The way she'd taken a beating to protect strangers. The way she'd endured months of humiliation with dignity intact. The way she'd forgiven him when he deserved nothing but contempt. That was strength. Real strength. The kind that didn't need to break others to prove itself. He tried, imperfectly, inconsistently, but genuinely, to build an empire that would make her proud instead of ashamed. Sharon Mullinax lived in a cottage that smelled like salt air and had windows that faced the sunrise. She woke without dread for the first time in years. Made her own breakfast. walked along the beach collecting shells like she was a child again, before money and power and underworld politics had consumed her life. Her hands still shook. Her memory still slipped occasionally. But she was no longer defined by her frailty, no longer reduced to a problem to be managed or a liability to be eliminated. She was just Sharon. And that was enough. Roman visited every Sunday, the way he used to before Brenda. They drank coffee on the porch and talked about small things. The weather, the garden Sharon was planting, the books she was reading. Sometimes they talked about the past, about Vincent, about the night that changed everything. "Do you regret it?" Roman asked one morning, watching pelicans dive for fish in the waves below. Saving that woman and her baby. Nearly dying for strangers. Sharon smiled. Not even for a second. That moment, that choice, defined who I was. Who I wanted to be. Everything else was just noise. Even the empire we built? Even that. She looked at her son with clear eyes. Empires crumble, Romy. Buildings burn. Money disappears. But the choice to protect someone who can't protect themselves, that echoes forever. That's immortality. Roman stood on Sharon's porch one evening 6 months after the dinner, watching the sun set over the Pacific. His mother sat in her rocking chair, peaceful and content, knitting something he suspected would be hilariously unwearable but would treasure anyway. Georgina's latest text message glowed on his phone. "Aced my midterm. Thank you for believing I was worth saving." He thought about Brenda, disappeared into obscurity. Her ambition turned to ash. He thought about the families he'd destroyed over the years in pursuit of power, wondering how many had deserved it and how many had simply been convenient. He thought about the empire waiting for him back in the city. Still dangerous, still compromised, still running on the edge of violence and law. But he also thought about Georgina stepping between cruelty and its victim. About his mother taking bullets for strangers. About the moment he'd finally remembered that power without conscience was just organized cruelty wearing a crown. "What are you thinking about?" Sharon asked, setting down her knitting. "That I spent 20 years building an empire on fear," Roman said quietly. "And it took a maid earning minimum wage to teach me that courage looks like." Sharon smiled. "Fear makes people obey. But conscience makes them follow. Your father knew that. I'm glad you finally remembered." Roman nodded, watching his mother rock gently in her chair, free and dignified and finally, truly safe, not because of his power, but because of his choice to wield it differently. The empire he returned to that night was the same one he'd left. Same territories, same conflicts, same moral compromises. But the man who ran it had changed. And sometimes that's how revolutions begin. Not with armies or manifestos, but with a single person deciding that cruelty, no matter how convenient, would no longer be mistaken for strength. True power, Roman finally understood, wasn't making people fear you. It was having the strength to fear what you might become, and choosing conscience anyway. Thanks for watching till the very end. If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. I'll be dropping another unforgettable story tomorrow, so make sure you don't miss it.